Hi guy, welcome to the AMIGArama podcast. I'm your host Lorfarius, and for this week in our 36th episode we will be taking a look at Stunt Car Racer. But as always, before we look at the game, let's have a jump into a bit of this week's news. Now, on a bit of personal news, I picked up a Nintendo Switch this week, and to be honest, I have just sunk so much time into that. It's absolutely addicting. I've been playing things like Mario Kart Deluxe, Mario Odyssey, Golf Story, which surprised me wholeheartedly because it's a proper golf RPG, but it's so much fun. It's absolutely awesome game. The graphics reminded me of Sensible Golf in a very odd, weird way. But yeah, fantastic game. Things like Hollow Knight as well. I've been having so much fun with that this past week. I mean, especially in handheld mode, that thing is fantastic. You can just charge it at night and then take it to bed with you. Play a bit of full-on console gaming just before you go to sleep. It's absolutely fantastic. I've been having awesome fun. Now, in other news, I've just noticed that everythingamiga.com are holding the AMIGOS Amigathon. Now, the blurb says on July 7th at 10:30 a.m. UTC time, the Amigos will be playing Amiga games for up to 24 hours to raise funds for the sick kids through the Children's Miracle Network of Hospitals. For every $1 donated, the Amigos will play 1 minute of the Amiga game of your choice. Now, they did this last year, and I think it was 12 hours long. It was, I didn't catch it myself at the time because I wasn't really into podcasts, I'm afraid. But from the stuff I've heard about it and the clips there, it looked absolutely fantastic. I'm sure it's just going to be as fun this year around as well. So certainly go and track that down, have a listen. It's the 7th of July at 10:30 a.m. UTC. So check your local clocks. Now, in other Amiga news, this one just sort of skirted me by, and I just discovered it by accident when I was reading through some Twitter threads. But there's been a brand new Amiga game come out called Worthy. Now, this was a bit of a surprise. I mean, it has been mentioned on other retro gaming podcasts, but I'm on. I listen to so many podcasts, I tend to pile them up and listen to them in sections. So I'm probably a few weeks out of date with this one, but judging off the website, it does actually sound quite good. Assume the role of a fearless boy and collect the required number of diamonds in each stage in order to win the girl's heart. Travel from maze to maze, kill the baddies, avoid the traps, collect beers, your necessary fuel to keep you going, find the diamonds, prove to her you're worthy. Featuring 50Hz Amiga 500 Optimize, I think that's Parliament, isn't it? Yeah. 40 action-packed levels, mind-bending puzzles, superb 32 colour pixel art, catchy tunes, lovely music, punchy vibrant SFX, arcade style presentation with multiple endings. Now, it seems to be priced at €9 for a digital copy, or you can buy, this is quite interesting, a box copy which includes a CD version and floppy disk for €23. That's actually quite cheap. I think that deliver worldwide as well. You can get that from pixelglass.org/#worthy. I'll stick a link in the show notes as I always do with all this information. But it does look like a pretty good game, and graphics wise, it's like a top down puzzler where you're exploring like a castle with levels and diamonds and a mad vibrant run around and collect stuff, and the graphics were very, very similar in a way to Bubble Bobble. Maybe that's just me, but it did look quite interesting. It's had fairly good reviews knocking around as well. I mean, I've never really done like these indie type games before because no one's actually really passed them on to me, and I've picked up a couple to play. But would people be interested in me doing full episodes on something like that? I suppose it'd be fairly easy for me to get in touch with them because, it's modern day, isn't it? And then I'm sure they'd be quite happy to talk about what they've done and maybe a bit of history behind it and what drove them to it. Let me know either in the comments or drop me a line on @AmigaRamaPod on Twitter. Now, I'd just like to pass out a huge thanks again. I've had a couple more Patreon supporters come along, which is always fantastic. I'm happy that people like the show enough to keep contributing every month. I'm sure we're a small audience. I always want to get bigger, so I'm always asking for anyone's help. Just if you like the show, share it, drop an iTunes review, or just come along and get involved in the community. We're on Discord, the Facebook page, or just the Twitter account. I'm always around. I will get back to you. And with that, let's take a look at this week's game. Now, for this week, I've gone and selected Stunt Car Racer. Now, this is certainly something I was very familiar with as a kid. It was on a single floppy disk, and I can remember going around to different friends' houses and just like spending hours and challenging each other, and were amazed by the graphics and the way it looked. And I mean, I did that with a lot of multiplayer games at the time, but there's always a few that really stand out in your mind, and especially with the way they look and the way they play, and this was really up there as one of them all-time greats, for me anyway. But we never know as we dig into it and go back to it. It might not be as good as I remember, but let's carry on with the show. Now, it was published by Microprose. They were responsible for games like Rainbow Warrior, which was the Greenpeace title. I'm pretty sure I've mentioned that before. That was also the first ever Amiga game I ever actually saw at about, must have been 6 or 7 years old. Rick Dangerous 1 and 2. We just covered Rick Dangerous recently. Xenophobe. I'm not even sure what that is. I'm assuming it's something related to aliens. They usually are. And Simulacra. Is that a strategy game? I'm not entirely sure. I just scribbled it down. It was developed by Jeff Crammond. Now, he's responsible for a lot of like 8-bit races, I think, in the day. I'm thinking like the Formula Grand Prix games and Revs and stuff like that. He didn't start out as an Amiga programmer. I think he might be thinking the Commodore 64. Anyway, this was released in 1989. As I said, it came on one disc at a record-busting price of $24.95. Wow, that is proper top dollar, as they say. Now, it was available for 2 players, with a maximum of up to 8, being able to play it across the different leagues and divisions. But it had one thing very, very special. You could link up 2 Amigas and play head-to-head with like a serial link mode, which is not something I ever saw or have ever actually tried, but just the fact that you could have a room with 2 TVs and 2 Amigas in was pretty much unlikely, I think, at the time. That must have cost an absolute fortune. But again, it's just something. This is the late 80s, and you've got something like that kicking around. Now, it was coded by Jeff Crammond. Again, he was responsible for Formula 1 Grand Prix, which is a similar sort of looking game. The Sentinel, straight away there, something proper serious. World Circuit and Bomboozle. Graphics by John Cumming, and he was responsible for games like, is it Ivan Stewart's Super Off-Road? That's quite a good racer. Rainbow Islands, Super Off-Road is very, very similar to Indie Heat. Rainbow Islands, everyone's favourite, that was an ocean game. Paradroid 90, that does ring a bell, actually. I think that's a top-down shooter. I might be thinking of something else. And, he also did the graphics for Simulacra as well. So him and Jeff, because he did work on a lot of this type of stuff together, I think. Right, usually at this point I'll say who did the music, if there was a team or anything behind it. Pretty much there isn't. There's only sound effects throughout the entire game. Now, I tried 3 different copies of this, but there was no sort of title screen music, no run anywhere, and I ran through levels, and the best I could see, it's only Jeff Crammond linked to the sound effects. Again, I might have missed something, and I know we're trying to put more and more more and more music into the show, but it was a bit disappointing when I realised that, we're going to have a week off because I can't actually do anything. Now, the game was originally developed as a land-based roving vehicle sim on the Commodore 64. Ooh, what a mouthful. But when Jeff Crammond added a ramp, he realised it was a lot more fun jumping off and actually landing. He added a track to this to keep the vehicle close to the ramps, and the game was born. this come obvious as you're actually playing the game that it's quite high up. The tracks are almost like suspended on platforms, but these are like solid brick platforms, and it always reminds me of the theme park ride builder. You can build like a roller coaster. It goes up and down and around and everything. You can't do that in this game, but it's that sort of style to it. And in all these ramps that go up and down, and there's no loot from what I could see, sadly. There was always talk of a sequel to this because it was quite a good seller. However, it never really came together. It's probably because Jeff was more focused on like the F1 type of games. But a group of hackers, from what I could work out, got together in 2004 and created something called Stunt Car Racer TNT, or the new tracks. And that had an extra 8 tracks on top of the original ones, and they also changed the colour palette. And going back to it, it does look like pretty much an updated version of the game. And I think I played it last year on a CD32, and it was a very, very good version of the game. And certainly if you like this, it's well worth going back to, because these are quite well designed tracks. The sequel that Jeff Crammon had in mind was actually called Stunt Car Racer Pro, and it was teased for about 9-10 years, something like that. He really was planning to do this. I think he must have got distracted and started doing any things. But it wasn't until, bear in mind, this came out in 1989, but it wasn't until 2005, February 2005, where he finally turned around and officially admitted that the game is officially cancelled. And I did try digging into that. I couldn't really find out why. I suspect it just had been so long by then that the entire market had moved on, 15, 16 years later. But little did he know that there's all sort of like fan-based communities and stuff. And the fact that you had this, the TNT version knocking around, that's probably just the year before. So there was a lot of excitement there for it. There was numerous conversions for this. It was released on the Atari ST, the PC DOS version, Commodore 64, that was the original actually, ZX Spectrum, and the Amstrad CPC. They all pretty much look the same. They're very, very similar. You've got different things like colours and so on, but it tends to be very well thought of and a great game to play. Everyone seems to really, really like it. And one of the good things about this, compared to other Amiga games, is that you can actually save the game to disk. Now, it doesn't seem right that really for a racing game, especially for what this actually is. But no, there's the option there, and you can dig right into it. I'm sure by now that you're expecting me to dive right into some crazy story about how a driver works his way up through the stunt car racing leagues and challenges everybody and all the rest of it. But no, this is just a pretty plain racing game. There's no story whatsoever. The closest thing you get to any sort of narrative is the sense that you take part in different divisions of the Stunt Car Racer League, and there's little graphics in between the races, whether you win or lose, but that's about as exciting as that part gets, I'm afraid. Now, when you actually play the game, you are in a cockpit of a stunt car. I've never quite seen anything like it. It's like a cage going all the way all the way around, and you are looking out through the front. You can actually see the engine in front of you with all like the exhaust pipes that come up with like flames spitting out of them. You can see the tyres on the front of the car. You see them all moving. That impressed me straight away because it's very, very interactive in a way. Usually, the cars are off to the side and there's not much like animation or anything, but on this there actually is, and as you're speeding along and stuff, you can actually see them moving. It's quite impressive. I don't know how to put it, but the flames that come out of the exhaust pipe, they always remind me of like a big pile of church organs. I'm thinking of like that Simpsons episode when they're all playing the music and they're all sat there, and Bart Simpson has changed the music, and it's like something like, is it Led Zeppelin or something, play it in the background. It just reminded me of that. It's very funny every single time that you're racing around and you just think, oh, maybe it's going to kick in with some music along the line to that. But sadly it doesn't. As I said, there is no music whatsoever, just sound effects. Going around the cockpit, you can see things like a speed bar, and what I mean by that is it's a usual indicator of you like 0 to 200, and there's like a yellow bar that goes up and down depending on how fast you're going. You see lap times, a flag symbol that lights up to show if you're in the lead. Stopwatch, again, that lights up if you're doing the best lap for that current lap. You can also see your best time by a little indicator with little text readouts there. It's nothing fancy whatsoever. I mean, this is it's a 3D racer, and it's pretty typical for the time. But I mean, one thing I did kept thinking whilst I was playing is just how much the look reminded me of like Frontier Elite. It's that very almost polygon-like 3D type of car. You know, it's quite impressive. But the thing is, the graphics are very, very simple. I think because of this. I mean, all of the tracks are fully coloured. You can see the ground and like the grass and mountains off in the distance, but there's no like buildings or horizons or major backings that you usually get in stuff like that. It's very, very simple. But the thing is, you're not confused about what's there. You know, it does look great for the type of game that it is. And most of you're focused on the actual racing. You're not like driving past a few trees or anything. There's no sort of like objects by the sort of the road to distract you or get in the way. On the racing itself, there's no other real graphics in the sense that you can't see your driver or the other drivers. The other cars are just like simple 3D objects with tyres on. It's not really the point of it. There are some graphics in between the races where you can actually see the other races and who you're up against, and they're quite comedic and quite silly names. I think a lot of it, graphic style, it reminded me of Micro Machines, and of course this came out in '89, so maybe this is where Micro Machines pinched the idea of the small square driver from. It's very, very similar to that, and they're all doing very silly faces. It was just a nice tie-in, though, I thought, to Micro Machines. When you crash the car or when you start the races, this huge crane picks the car up and drops you off. And the reason you know it's there is because you can see these like big chains in front of the car. Very, very clunky, very, very metallic, and it's a brilliant way of getting you in different spots, but sadly you never actually see the crane. It's a shame because I'm sure they could have stuck some sort of like rectangle off to the side or something just for a bit of a hint, but there's no sort of graphics for it. I mean, this is a pretty basic looking game. There's not much more to it by what you can actually see, what's going on around you, but I think the point of this is it's all about speed and it's all about rapid driving. Now, of course, for that sort of thing, you need to have excellent controls, and I'm happy to say that they are very sharp, they are spot on, they react very, very quickly. The car is extremely fast, yet it has some real weight to it. It feels like almost like driving a 4x4 in a way. You feel like you're in something that's got some proper weight for it and you can move it along the track. You press up to accelerate, down to brake. I doubt you'll be doing much braking because this is the type of game. It's like driving a monster truck in a way because you really got to move your way around. And of course you will brake on some corners and things, but most of the time you're just clashing your way around and really going crazy. There is a limited speed boost, which is just linked to the button. That's the only thing the button does. It works quite well. Again, it's not unlimited in the sense that you can't keep flying round and round and round the track with it pressed on. There's no sort of upgrade to let you do that constantly. I'm sure there's some sort of a hack, but when you come to use it, you realise that in a way it's a good thing that it is limited because you'd be going absolutely crazy because most of it is linked to doing massive jumps around about the track. It also has this weird, I don't know if I say even it's weird, there's an auto accelerate option and I've never really seen that in a car before. And what I mean by that is if you just tap forward slightly, it just locks it into drive, and then you can so if you're in a big long straight with like a couple of gaps in or ramps and stuff, you can just focus on moving left and right, and that sounds a bit off and maybe awful, but it works really, really well, because at the same time, a lot of time you can see the track ahead and what's going on. You want to be planning in your mind and reacting to what's coming up, and it can give you a break mid-race to really focus on what you're doing. And the great thing is, if you want to take control back, the car will snap immediately. Like if you tap the joystick or take it back, it will just snap to your control instantly, and you can move around really, really well with it. And I quite enjoyed using a mix of it, but you do not have to. It's there as an option if you want it. There's also a weird thing where the car will auto adjust to the track. So if you're firing ahead on a real long straight, if you're bouncing around because you've lost control a bit, as long as you sort of steady it off a bit, the car will straighten up and carry on. And it's like that. It's like the accelerator in a way. It's more there as an aid to help you out. I don't think you couldn't see where you could turn that off, but you don't need to. But it can be quite handy because, again, there are a lot of times where you're coming up to huge ramps and you want to use the boost and really go powering up them. And you just want to lay off, let it go straight, and then go flying over them. And it really, really does add to the experience. Now, of course, you couldn't have a driving game without a decent engine sound, and I'm happy to say that it's really, really satisfying. It's loud, it crashes, it bangs. There's lots of metallic clunks as you're going around, because you're in a big metal roll cage, I suppose. And when you're clanging off stuff and other cars and things, it really does make that fun. But the engine really responds when you press the boost button, and the engine gets louder and louder, and it really builds up. I'm getting very excited about an engine noise, but they always really draw me into a game, and I think a good racing game really needs it because it just sets that atmosphere for you, and it gives you a good build-up for what's coming up ahead. Now, there's 4 divisions with a split across 8 tracks, and that's all you get, with multiple people to race against. There's a limit of, I think it's 3 people per race. There is no in-game map or HUD, it's just very basic looking out of the car, but in between each race you do get like a 3D view of the map, which is sort of it builds itself before. It's quite an impressive 3D effect, but these aren't like some really, really over-the-top complicated tracks. You'll learn them pretty quickly. And of course there's like multiple practice modes, so you can take the time to, it's not like he's playing like with Lotus where it goes on for miles and miles and miles, and you can sort of learn it if you keep playing it repeatedly. With this, you get it down in a few minutes. It's almost like Mario Kart style tracks, they're all fixed. There's nothing too over the top or intense. Now, one of the biggest things I must mention about this game is the sense of speed. I mean, for what this is, it's a 3D racer, but the fact is you've got that boost button, and no matter where you are, if you're firing down a straight or you're going down a hill, or you're going off over these huge jumps, and you put a bit of a boost behind it, the car doesn't half move, and I mean it proper moves, decent clipping, and there's no like frame slowdowns or anything like that. The whole thing moves fantastically. You've got a real sense of speed, and it's incredible how fast it goes when you're going over a massive ramp, and you might have a jump at the top, or you go flying off. You think, I'm going to go out of control, but you're not. You're moving at high speed, and you go flying down over the other side. It's like playing a drivable roller coaster, and the amount of times I was just sat there and thinking, oh my god, I'm going to crash out, and I didn't, and I managed to stick on course and stay straight, and you land with that satisfying like metallic crunch, and then to just go speeding off afterwards. It's fantastic, absolutely fantastic. Of course, this did have its problems. No game is ever perfect. I think one of the biggest things that stood out to me is, even though you've got other drivers on the track, there's no real indication of where they are or the position or anything. You're just thundering your way around, and they never feel like they're actually there. A lot of the times, I'm not sure, maybe it was just me, I'd come off the track and I could see them off in the distance. And by the time I've landed, there's a bit of a time drop there. And they're still just a bit ahead, and it's not like they'd shot off. Maybe it's like an early boomerang effect. I'm not entirely sure. But you never really sat there thinking, these are a real challenge. They just seem to be there to steal your time. And I would have liked to have a bit more of a competitive edge, maybe to try and ram them off the track and stuff. At the same time, the tracks themselves can be quite difficult, so it's like 50-50 in a way, because you don't want to be too focused on the other drivers, but at the same time, you need to keep an eye on them so they're not causing you too many problems along the way. Maybe it's not a bad point. It's quite an odd mix, but I would have liked something a bit better. The game itself has very, very few options. I mean, there just isn't anything on the menus beyond being able to like save the game. There's no sort of like instant replay. You can't see any sort of huge accident that you've just been. I mean, the game should be capable of that. I mean, if it could record it in some way and then play it back, and it's a shame that it doesn't. But again, this is the late 80s. Maybe it just wasn't something that games were doing at the time. I'm not entirely sure. Because I think I said before, there's a practice mode stuck in there, so you can at least learn the tracks and see them from different angles and stuff, and come up with. That's the wrong thing to say. See them, explore them in a different way, because as you get to learn them and you tackle the jumps in different ways. I don't think I said it earlier, but because the tracks are up in the air, there's not any like railings on the left or right of the road. You know, you're completely focused on what you're driving on, but because of this, it's incredibly easy to come flying off the track. And once you're on, you know, you're dropping about 20, 30 feet through the air, even higher if you've gone up around, and that's it. You're out of the race and it's over. And this is very similar to what you get on the Ghost track on Super Mario Kart. You know, you'd be thundering along high speed, you get nudged, you fall off. And then the other ghost comes along and picks you. There's a little chap on the cloud comes along. I'm not sure what that's called, and it throws you back on the track. With it's the chains. You know, this is striving the way before Mario Kart. Very, very similar to that. But it does feel like it takes absolutely ages to stick you back on the track. And there was a couple of times when I was really into it. I was enjoying the race, and I just thought, oh, not again. Couldn't you just like reload and stick me on the track or something like that? Maybe you like that when you're playing a game, because it's more based on it's almost like a simulator in a way, rather than supposed to be an arcade racer, I think. But because of the type of game it is, and it's all stunt cars and jumping and crazy jumps, it just comes across as more of an arcadey sort of racer. The biggest problem, of course, the major problem is there is no music. Again, I could not find any anywhere, and it's just really, really disappointing. Maybe they just weren't capable of doing anything like that, or maybe it was the copy I was playing with. But I even had a look at some WHD load editions, and nothing came up there. So I'm not sure if I've missed out, but I'm pretty sure it doesn't have anything. The magazines at the time were absolutely raving about this. Amiga Action gave it 92%, Amiga Format 89%. I think they commented on the lack of options and things, and that's probably what stopped it from being a 90%er. Amiga Power 91%, CU Amiga 92%, and the one 5 out of 5, which maybe they dropped that and went to percentages, because usually I think they do give percentage scores. Anyway, that's very, very odd, but, you know, straight away there's something very special here with the game when all the mags are jumping on board the 90% sort of range. Now, it's a price score smasher, proper score smasher, that's what I meant to say, and it really is no surprise. I mean, I had so much fun, you know, tremendous fun. It was absolutely fantastic. It's a pretty basic racing game, but just the fact that you bounce, it's almost like dodgem carts in a way, that when you're bouncing around these tracks and you're going around these crazy corners and coming up to these jumps and the loops, and the jumps really, really do add something to it. There's no real gravity in the game, even though you're up in the air. That's where I'm probably not explaining that right. When you go off a jump, the car does drop as it would do under gravity, but it's almost like a moon buggy. It's like there's a bit of a float on the way the car moves when it comes down on the other side. And it's like it takes a moment before it falls. And it's only a slight lack of speed on the way it drops and stuff. But it really has the experience, because it almost feels like you could go bouncing down the track and hit off things and then coming down. I'm really not explaining that very, very well, but it just makes it feel fantastic as a racing experience, because a lot of it's very, very teeth-wrenching stuff, and you really are stuck there with the joystick, and you know, happily, it really controls very, very well. The frame rate was absolutely fantastic. It was very, very smooth. I couldn't see any problems with it whatsoever. I did test it on the Amiga 500 and a souped-up A1200. I was doing that bit on the emulators, and I even, because I wasn't sure, I thought maybe it was down to me. I'm thinking there must be a difference in speed between the two, but I even recorded footage from each version and then played it side by side on the same bit of track, and there doesn't seem to be any difference, and I would have thought they'd have souped it up in some way, but it's just a really, really well programmed and designed game. And Jeff Crammond's an absolutely fantastic job with this. I mean, some of his other games must be fantastic. It never really feels like you're actually racing against other people. It's almost like you're racing the track itself, because they almost come alive. There's so many turns and ups and downs and jumps and things, and it's almost like, I must sound insane, it's almost like it's an interactive track, and it's almost like it's responding to it. They're just designed very, very well, and even when you're pelting it around at high speed, there's a fair few moments where you just be sat there with the boot pressed down and you just think, I can make that corner, I'm going to go for it. And you just like skim around the top corner, as some of these ramps will actually turn up as you're going right. They'll go up on like the right or the left, and it's almost like you're fighting gravity to stay on the track. And sometimes you will just scoot over and go flying off, but a lot of the times you'll stay on, and it's like driving a Dodge or a go-kart. It's just absolutely awesome fun. It really does nail that, that one more go factor. I just couldn't put it down. I was playing and playing and playing this, and usually when I come through a game, I'll do it in a couple of sessions, but this, I even had a quick go before I started recording, because I just wanted to get that feeling of speed back again, and I think it's something that I'm going to keep returning to. I'm quite happy to say that the TNT game with the extra track, and I mean, God, that even exists. I know if you've got a CD32, you can go and play that edition, which is, it's a bit more souped up, but I think it's on WHD load as well. I'm definitely going to be playing around with that and having a look later, just because it adds so many more tracks. It's a shame there's only 8 on the game, but it's nearly. It didn't do anything else with the series. I'm sure if we'd been given the opportunity to come out with more tracks later, I'd have loved to see some sort of like data disc coming up off the back of it later. The 3D look for the game is really impressive, and I thought it looked absolutely amazing. Now, this is a very, very early Amiga game, especially for that sort of look. Most racers were only just dabbling in this sort of thing at the time, but it's very impressive. It could have done with improved graphics. It's a shame there's no sort of like AGA version or something coming on later on, or maybe it could have taken advantage of the Amiga itself. The lack of music is pretty poor. I think that's just how the game is. Sadly, it could have just done with more, but yeah, as you can probably tell, I really enjoyed it. I thought this is a really fun game. It must be fantastic to play with other people, especially in like the Amiga to Amiga linked up mode. You'd have all sorts of fun. I can certainly imagine playing this with a group of people today, and you'd probably have as much fun as you would in, say, like some modern racer. It really does have enough going for it, and the fact that you can sling the cars around the track and really put some weight into the vehicle. Fantastic game, complete thumbs up from me. It's in a completely different league to Lotus 2, and I really enjoyed that game. But if I had to compare the two, I think I'd pick this, just because I had great fun with Lotus 2, but I had more fun with this because there was a lot more going on. It felt a lot more interactive, and you felt like you were part of the track and you were really involved in the race. And it had its problems, but most games do, but it did more than enough to make up for it. Seems as good a time as any to end the show there. If you want to see some footage of me playing the game, you can pop along to AMIGArama.com, or you want to make any comments, or even get in touch with me for suggestions or ideas for future games. You can do so on the Facebook page, which is facebook.com/AMIGArama. Drop me a line on Twitter @AMIGAramaPod. Or even drop me an email. Not many people seem to use that option, sadly. Lorfarius @AMIGArama.com. Until next time, guys.